So let's talk about Cinebench, because that's what AMD measures with. Everybody knows Cinebench. And this is actually a question I got from an email. So Cinebench, and more importantly, is it relevant? Because AMD is constantly pushing this thing as their weapon of choice for PC performance. They're always saying Cinebench is their standard, their gold standard. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
So there's a couple of things, right? One, when they say, when you ask me, is Cinebench relevant? It is relevant, but to a specific segment. So if we're talking about mainstream users, people that use notebooks for everyday uses, it's not quite relevant. It's more relevant to high-end desktop and workstations, right? What is Cinebench? Cinebench is an application benchmark. It's based on an application called Cinema 4D. If you are excited about the upcoming Avengers movie, for example, a lot of the special effects, CGI, are done with software like Cinebench. So it's designed for high-end movie editing, special effects, and it typically is used in workstations and data servers. So what it comes out, the result it comes out, doesn't really apply to notebooks. In other words, if my Cinebench scores high, it doesn't mean my Excel calculation is going to be accurate. In other words, the way it reflects my Excel calculation will be accurate. It's not a complete apples to apples. So with AMD using Cinebench as a proxy for everything you do on your PC, it's not accurate in that regard.
So in terms of Cinebench, I mean, how much do you think retailers know about this? I mean, I imagine going into a retail store and talking to an RSP about the different benchmarks. How much do you think that's discussed in store? Because in my experience, most people don't go into the stores and they're not talking about Cinebench, they're not talking about Sysmark. So, what are your comments about that?
I think my opinion there is you have, like any other population, right? You have people that are very tech savvy, people that are not so tech savvy, and some of those tech savvy people might pay attention to tech websites where they read about Cinebench as an example. But I would guess the majority of folks probably wouldn't even know about Cinebench or wouldn't care about Cinebench. So to me, it is a benchmark that AMD uses, and it appeals to a certain segment of the population, but not across the board.
All right, Gabe. Well, so Intel pitches this benchmark, AMD pitches that benchmark. I mean, which one is relevant? I mean, how do we even determine which one is relevant and which one actually is sustainable?
And I go back to the way I explained earlier. You have to look at what people do on their PC. So let's say you have somebody that does video editing on their PC, or let's say Excel, or doing stock calculation as an example. So I would go back to say, which applications do they typically use? Well, typically they will use Microsoft Office because there's like 1.2 billion users of Microsoft Office. Most likely he will be using that application. And then I go back and say, which benchmark uses Microsoft Office? Well, Sysmark uses it. So in contrast to, let's say, AMD pitches PCMark, PCMark says, hey, my benchmark is equivalent. You should trust me rather than Sysmark. The way I go is like, okay, that person I just talked to uses Microsoft Office, uses Excel for what he needs to do. What does PCMark use? Well, they use something called LibreOffice. Have you heard of LibreOffice?
I have not.
Okay. So LibreOffice is a similar application, but it's not widely used. It's about 10% of people that use Microsoft Office. It's also Linux-based, so how many people actually use Linux? Not many. So based on that result is not quite as accurate for that person who uses Microsoft Office. So in other words, I would trust the number that comes out of Sysmark better than I would trust that one, because the Sysmark is probably a better reflection of what he uses every day.